I have to think that art has to be able to have some sort of impact, you know? And I think stand-up comedy can be particularly powerful because it can speak so directly. Like, you know, I think movies, TV shows obviously have points of view, but I think stuff gets lost. There are people who are huge fans of Star Trek who are incredibly racist. And it's like, how can you do that? The whole point of Star Trek is not that. They had the first interracial kiss on screen. And you're against interracial dating? That's crazy.
This is Good One. I am Jesse David Fox, senior writer, Vulture, and author of Comedy Book. My guest today is Kumail Nanjiani, whose special Night Thoughts comes out on Hulu on December 19th. It is Kumail's first stand-up special in 12 years, and it is good. Like, really good. It's my favorite special of the year. It is arguably one of the best handful of specials released by anyone over the last decade. As we discussed, the special was largely influenced by the strikes of 2023 and the reaction Kumail received for getting jacked and co-starring in the first Marvel movie to truly bomb the Eternals. And as you'll hear, Kumail's return to stand-up was also a little bit, or maybe a lot bit, influenced by him appearing on this podcast in 2022. So, here is Kumail Nanjiani. I'm here with Kumail Nanjiani. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
What is the funniest thing that happened to you this week?
Well, so I've been doing this play, Oh Mary, and it's, you know, it's a live show, so like stuff happens. So this thing happened last night where there's a part where me and you've had Jinx on.
Yeah.
She plays Mary. I play her husband. It's just
her husband.
Her husband. Yeah, he doesn't deserve a name. And there's a part where I yell at her and she storms off, and my assistant opens the door for her, and she sort of like has a moment with him and storms out. And so I'm sitting at my desk. He opens the door, but he opens it kind of too hard, so like the door like hits the wall and is kind of slowly bouncing back. And I'm just looking, and I'm seeing her. The door is behind her, and she's gonna turn around and storm out. And I know what's gonna happen. I'm like, she's gonna run into this door so fucking hard. And I'm just sitting there. There's nothing I could do. I'm like, in the next 15 seconds, something crazy is about to happen. And she turned and she slammed right into it, and the whole wall shook. It was huge. And then she was really funny. She made it like it was his fault. She was like, get off me. And the audience knows in that moment that like, oh, that was not supposed to happen, you know? Stuff like that happens all the time. There's a time where I'm supposed to grab a whiskey bottle out of her hand, and we like really got into a tussle, and I pulled it out, but it slipped my hand, and it went and hit an audience member in the chest. And then now that's a prop for the rest of the episode. So now I kind of have to like figure out how to stay in character while get the bottle from this guy. There was one time, there's a part where she's like, I'm bleeding. And I'm like, you're not bleeding. She's pretending to be hurt. I go, I'm bleeding. And she's like, I'm bleeding. I'm like, you're not bleeding. And I look, and she's actually bleeding. There's blood pouring out of her hand. And everyone in the audience could see it. And it happened exactly at that moment. I've never done a play before, and it's really exciting because of, you know, when you have so many different cast members, just the random shit that can happen really increases. Like in stand-up, you can have a heckler, you can riff and all this stuff. Ultimately, one person in control can exercise more control than 5 people. And it's also such a high-energy, fast show. When things like go slightly off, it's very exciting.
I will say I saw it a few weeks ago, and you come out for the curtain call. You know, you're second to last. And I would say I don't think I've ever seen you happier in your entire life. You were like beaming.
Really?
You're like a little kid who was so excited about what they got to do and get to continue doing.
Yeah, thank you. I really am loving doing it. Honestly, the first week was pretty challenging. And then the second week suddenly was like, oh, a lot more. Halfway through the first week, I realized like, oh, I know where I'm headed. I know what this is, and I have to get there. I'm not there. So the first week is figuring out where to go, and then the second week was all honing in stuff. And then after that, it's just been kind of playing. And, you know, I've been doing comedy over 20 years. I've learned new stuff about comedy in the last 2 months that I did not know before that.
Can you think of anything specifically?
Yeah. Well, one thing, you know, I've never in my life thought about comedy delivery or timing. I've just never thought about it. Like when I'm preparing for a role, I prepare everything. I do not prepare how to say the comedy lines, the joke lines. I just turn my brain off, see how it comes out. Same with stand-up. I don't think about timing. I don't think about delivery, say this loud, say this off. I don't think about that. I have to go by instinct. Here, you're doing the same lines every night, and you notice, like, oh, I said it slightly differently, and the laugh was bigger. And so for the first time, I've actually thought about timing, where the pause should be, what part should be loud, what part should not be loud, all that kind of stuff, almost like a little bit more scientific. I think it's going to be really interesting when I go back to to shoot something, how that's going to affect that. The other thing I've learned is when you're in a movie or TV show, the director, the editor is deciding where the audience is looking, right? Because they're making cuts. So close up on you, now we're looking at you, close up at me, now they're looking at me. On stage, the actors are deciding where the audience is looking. So I learned if someone else has a punchline, I have to stay completely still, because if I move, it pulls focus away, and then the joke doesn't land as well.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like paused in this like whole staying frozen in that emotional space for them to say the line. Once they get the laugh, then I can react. Because if I start reacting as they're talking, the laugh is smaller.
Yeah.
I've never had to worry about that before.
Fascinating. So I want to discuss your stand-up special and how I single-handedly got you to return to stand-up comedy.
You were one of the big factors.
We're going to get to it. But I want to provide some context of why you were away for stand-up for part of the time, which is in 2017, you released the movie The Big Sick. It is a surprise hit. I can't imagine you're like, oh, we'll do this indie movie. It was going to be as big as it was. You get nominated for a freaking Oscar. And I assume Hollywood does the thing Hollywood does periodically where they're like, what if we just open all the doors and see if this is going to be a person we're just going to like all rally around? And I imagine it was very exciting. Can you think of a moment or a story that captures that year after The Big Sick where Hollywood was like excited to have meetings with Kumail and offer him different things?
I mean, that year was crazy. The next year was crazy. I mean, it's crazy. We were backstage at some gala, something, I forget where. We're in this small room. It's me, Emily, and a bunch of other people. And Tom Hanks walks in, and everybody looks over like, oh my God, Tom Hanks is here. And he sees us and comes straight to us. He wants to talk to us. You're like, wow. So that kind of stuff, to me, the most exciting thing was getting to meet people who I've been a fan of forever, like Steven Spielberg or Guillermo del Toro or Tom Hanks, these kinds of people, and have them treat you like an equal in some kind of way. That was really, 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 really fun. And I understood this happens to comedy actors sometimes where they have like a moment and that window doesn't always last forever. And I've been very aware of that since the beginning. Like I knew okay, right now I'm the guy that I'm on the lists. That can change at any moment, I don't know what you do to prepare for it or how you deal with it or anything. But the whole time I knew I was never comfortable. I was never like, all right, now I've made it. It was always like, it's very, very fickle,
Yeah. So where were you in the fall 2022, which is when you appeared on a live version of this podcast at Vulture Festival? You had some movies do less well. One very famously was the movie The Eternals that did not perform as Marvel had expected. Where were you when we spoke?
I was probably about to go shoot a series called Welcome to Chippendales.
No, it was to promote Chippendales.
It was too. Okay, so I just finished it because that was a pretty quick turnaround. Yeah. So that's probably where I was, and I was about to go. So I just finished that. I was very proud of that because that was like a truly, fully dramatic role, and I really loved doing it. I loved playing like the same guy, one story for 6 months. It's very long. I got to work with amazing actors. Actually, working with Anna Lee Ashford, Andrew Reynolds, Murray Bartlett, and Robin De Jesus, who are all like theater Broadway actors. That's what made me want to do Broadway, because I was like, these actors are so good. They're so much better than screen actors. I was like, oh, I want to do what they do to see what it is. So that's when I first was like, all right, if it comes my way, I have to do it. So, and then I went and did Ghostbusters right after that. So I was sort of in the middle of like a period where I was really, just shooting a lot of stuff.
In this time period where it felt like your hiatus from stand-up was both on purpose and also just the nature of like the opportunities that were coming from you, and also obviously COVID, were you ever jealous of your stand-up friends? Would you ever see any of them be really good at stand-up and it'd bother you?
I really missed what I hated was I've always been fairly good about trying to not compare myself to other people, but I hated the feeling of not being good at something that I know I used to be good at. So I hated that. And I would see friends do well, and I was just really happy for them. But I didn't really have I wasn't really missing stand-up. I was missing it in this vague way of, oh, I wish I was still good at that thing, that now when I think about it, it terrifies me. And I remember what it was like when it was zero scary. Like, it was not scary at all. Like, I could go up on stage and be like, all right, I'm going to just see what happens. I'm not going to try and do material. I remember, doing the shows. I remember a point in my life where I was like, when I was living in New York, I think, I was like, I think I can go up in front of any room and do well, and really believing that. So I missed that feeling. I didn't really specifically miss the feeling of performing on stage. I felt creatively pretty fulfilled because I was doing a lot of writing and I was doing a lot of performing acting. So I wasn't really creatively frustrated. I just did. Yeah, I just didn't like not being good at it anymore.
So I went into that interview specifically with the goal of trying to convince you to do stand-up again. I can't remember. I think I might have said it while talking, but I told everyone beforehand. Like, literally, what are you doing at Vulture Festival?
No way, really?
I was like, I'm going to try to convince Kumail to do stand-up again. And there's two moments that stood out to me, but I was curious, like, what is your memory of the experience?
I think the thing that really, and it was you, and right after that, it was Brett Goldstein. It was very close, two people, like really giving me the hard sell. And with you, I remember we were on stage and we were talking and you brought up an old bit and you were like, do you remember doing it? And I was like, I think I can do it. And I sort of just did it. And it was so exciting to do it. It was an old bit, but it was so exciting to do it. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good feeling. So that was the first time that it felt like anything specific.
Yeah, that was the thing that I wrote down was I remember asking you to do it. You're like, I don't know if I do it.
Yeah.
And then you asked the audience, like, do you remember it? And truly no one. This was how they were learning you were a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And then you were like, kind of fumble through, and then it just logs in. And I go, how did that feel? And you're like, it felt fucking great.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's the thing I discovered in touring and stuff. A lot of people don't know me as a stand-up.
Yeah.
They think I'm some actor who's like, I talk about it in the special. But so that I remember that feeling, being like, oh, that was very, very exciting. Then Brett Goldstein at Sam Richardson's birthday party, he was like, do stand-up, man. You got to do stand-up again. You got to do stand-up again. And really, I don't remember when it was, but around after that is when I first started going to Largo a little bit here and there, not really fully. And when I was shooting Ghostbusters in London, which was like February, March, April of 2023, just a couple months after that, there was this show there that's really good called Always Be Comedy that, like, all these guys do, like Ed Gamble, Acaster, Nish, all these guys do. So I would drop in every now and then when they were performing and do like a 10-minute set, just to sort of feel if I wanted to keep doing it.
Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of you and being like, shit, so that's me that did that. I started, even before you told me that I had an influence, I started taking credit for it.
You did. Yeah, because truly, that was one of the factors.
Would you remember how that felt when you started going out a little bit?
Yeah. So I think my first few sets were all at Largo because you've been to Largo, I assume. I love that room. I love planning. All my friends have shows there. It's just a very, very safe place. I think my first set back was on Nick Kroll's show, and I actually didn't want to do a set on my own, so I was like, can I just do a two-man thing with you? And I kind of, in that, used it to sort of do a bit that I was working on, And I remember the first few times I did it at Largo, it was incredible because people were really excited to see me on stage. They hadn't seen me on stage in a while. They were excited I wasn't listed. So the first few times I did it, the first couple of weeks were really, really exciting. And then after that, I had a couple of weeks where I actually wasn't doing as well on stage. And I think I realized what it was, that in the beginning I was really nervous and sort of off rhythm, so I was really present. And then as I got more comfortable on stage, my delivery started defaulting to, because of muscle memory, the way I used to be on stage like 10 years ago when I was really doing it. And it felt disingenuous because I felt like I'm a different person, but on stage, I'm trying to pretend to be the person I was 10 years ago. And so those 2 weeks were like kind of not rough. I wasn't bombing or anything because the crowds are so good, but I really just didn't feel, I was like, I'm not quite feeling right. And I was like, okay, I have to figure out what this is. And so what changed for me was I was like, all right, I'm going to go out on stage. This is now a month into it, and I'm not going to have any obligation to do well. I'm just going to go and hang back and really lean back and see how it comes out and not worry about how I'm doing. As soon as I made that decision, suddenly, it was sort of like doing O'Mary. Suddenly it felt like, oh, this is the path now. So that really helped. And the other thing is the performing stand-up came back quicker than writing stand-up did. It took me a while to remember how to write stand-up again.
Like literally how a observation or idea gets to the point where it's something to bring on stage.
Yeah, and how to structure a joke, because it's very different than writing a movie screenplay. Like, you mentioned The Big Sick. The Big Sick is really about the balance between drama and comedy, right? Like, you can't really have a bunch of jokes in a row that upsets the balance. And that's true for unless it's like something like Naked Gun, even every comedy, you have like the periods where it's not funny. Like, you have to have that for the stakes of the story. Stand-up's not like that. Stand-up, you can have 10 punchlines in a row. In fact, that's the goal. And so I'd sort of gotten used to being like, all right, I have a joke, then I do a little bit, then I have a joke, then I do a little bit, then I have a joke. And I was like, oh, no, that's not how stand-up happens. Stand-up ideally is you do a setup and then you have 7 punchlines in a row. So readjusting to that took a little bit of doing.
Yeah, because I can imagine I guess I'll say lesser comedian, or a comedian not trying as hard, or a person who just would just be like, yeah, I'll talk for a little bit and there'll be a funny parts in it. That is not the comedian who you were or where you came up with. And the special is that of what you're able to get to the point where you're saying, which is like, there's so much joke writing in it that I forgot it was almost possible. Like, kids aren't working as hard as you guys were, and they're just, they have a chunk, and then there's sort of these sections within it that are sort of sub-jokes, and then each of that have different types of tags, not just sort of in it, or doing different types of things.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot this density was a thing that we were aspiring to.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of specials are just sort of like, yeah, it's like a funny time to hang out with this person.
I've seen a bunch of specials by people who I consider to be hilarious that I'm like, oh, come on. You should have worked on that, Get more punchlines in there. What I've always done is, and, I talked to Mark Maron, who, does not write at all. I'm the opposite. I write everything out. And then I want to forget it and discover stuff, but I write everything out. And one of the systems I've always used, that I still use writing stand-up, is I write my joke, my whole story on Google Docs, and I bold all the punchlines, and then I can look and see oh, there's not a punchline here for a while. I have to find something funny in there. So there's something, I wouldn't say mathematical because it is a field, but I do look at just the picture of it and go, okay, I need something here. And especially that was a challenge, especially for the last story in my special, because there's so much in there that I wanted to say that I was like, I need to have enough punchlines to keep it afloat.
Yeah. You had this unique experience of being very much a center part of the scene with the meltdown. Like, you were seeing everybody, and then you're away for 8-9 years, and now you're back in the LA comedy scene. I've noticed differences, but it's, I'm in it.
Yeah.
Was there things that you noticed that were different, changes that you were surprised by?
Well, what everyone says in LA is outside of Largo, there isn't really an alt scene anymore. And that's a real bummer, because when I was doing it, there really was, Meltdown was, we realized this later, where you're like, oh yeah, we were sort of the center of the alt scene in LA. And it was really it was really exciting. So doesn't really exist anymore. So when I started doing stand-up again, I'd ask my friends, okay, I know the clubs. Where else can I go? They're like, Largo. I'm like, where else? They're like, that's kind of it. There'll be small shows here and there, and they were good. Like Jared and Kara have a show that's really fun. And
Jared Logan and Kara Klink.
Yeah, they have a show that's really good. And, Hot Tub with Kurt and Kristen was going, and now that's done as well. Kurt's moved here, actually. He writes for Fallon now.
I know that.
And so that's been a big change. And I was never someone who did the clubs very much. I mean, I didn't do the Cellar until I moved away, and now I do it when I'm here. I haven't been able to do it this trip, but I do it when I'm here. I never really did the clubs very much. I never did the Store. I did the Improv every now and then, but I was like, okay. It was in the strike last year that I decided I want to do a special.
Yeah.
I decided like, okay, I have a year, and in this year, I want to try and I want to have a special done. And so to do that, I have to get a lot of reps in. And it was a negotiation with Emily because she was like, she was here with me when we lived here, and she's been to every awful open mic. She's like, is this going to be like that again? So we negotiated. I would do 2 nights a week of shows, but then I would stack shows. I would go to the Improv, then I'd go to the Store, and sometimes the Laugh Factory. So I would do 4 or 5 sets a week. And so to do that, the thing with Largo is, Largo is amazing. It's my favorite place to do stand-up there. Largo's a hang. You go there at 8. Show starts at like 8:35. You're hanging out with your friends. You don't know when you're up. Then you go up, hang out and watch your friends. That's your whole night. The Improv or Comedy Store, you can get there. They're like, you're up at 9:10. You get there at 9:05. You're up at 9:15. You're off stage. You can go, you can really like compress it. So I went to a lot of the clubs, and I was a little surprised at how homogenous I found a lot of that comedy to be. Because for me, I did Tim Heidecker's podcast, and I talked about this, but so much of when I was coming up in Chicago and then in New York, all that mattered was originality and point of view. You just had to be yourself and different from everything else. And then I was watching all these comedians. I was like, this is all the same material. You're all talking about the exact same thing, and you have the exact same opinions on them. So I found that to be sort of jarring. Maybe it's always been like that. I don't know. And so I was like, oh man, the state of comedy and all this stuff. But then when I go to like, I'll sometimes drop into like little shows in other towns when I'm doing, and when I see those kids doing stand-up, I'm like, oh, we're okay. These guys are great.
Yeah, I heard you say that, and I was very curious because I wonder if it's partly about who is the biggest comedian in the world
Of course.
Because it's like when you were last here, Louis C.K. was the biggest comedian in the world, regardless of everything else. But like, that created the North Star was an idea of truthfulness or vulnerability and minimum inward looking.
Yes.
And Dave Chappelle is the biggest comedian in the world, and it is extremely outward looking. And I think that is a model. Then the next biggest comedians are like, our job is to be outward looking like Dave Chappelle.
It's all outward facing, yeah.
And then because you're all observing the same thing, especially with the nature of how the internet bubbles up the same stories, you're now just sort of talking about the same 5 things.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly the difference, with Louis. And what we valued was sort of like looking inward and revealing ourselves to the crowd. And now it's all like pointed outwards. And that's really the majority of the very successful comedy. I mean, I think it's on its way down a little bit. I was talking to some agents about this. But there are more comedians that can sell out arenas than ever in history, right? And now, like, I'd heard that, like, music sales had started to go down a little bit, and now it's affecting, like, comedy sales are starting to go down a little bit, which has to happen because I was like, there can't be that many comedians who are that successful who are all exactly the same.
Yeah.
It just cannot last.
There can't be enough people to buy tickets to see the same show over and over.
Yeah, my God, I see these clips, and I sound so old when I say this, but it really has been. Look, because I love comedy. Obviously, I love comedy, and I loved, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's really exciting. Oh, that's a funny way to say that. And to not even value that anymore, not just being not good at it, but to not value it. I'm like, well, then what's the point of doing it? It feels like, it does genuinely feel like people are just doing it to be successful rather than to do the comedy of it.
Yeah, it is the downside of there is a model of success now for stand-up where through the certain streaming services being like, yeah, we'll keep on just putting out these specials.
Dude.
So then you're like, cool, my job is to sort of just keep the train running.
Oh my God. Yeah. I cannot imagine. Like, when I look at someone like Anthony Jeselnik, right? So when I was doing stand-up again, I was like, dude, I want to do an hour. What's your system? He has a 3-year cycle for each special. And it's amazing. For the first year, he just goes in LA, up in LA, tries all the jokes. Then he spends a year in the clubs honing that hour. Then he tours for a year, records it. Then he tours out of the country. So he's on a 3-year cycle, and he's one of the sharpest comedians working today. And then all these other guys are putting out like a special every year, every few months. That's remarkable.
I think you said this, but one of the big differences persona-wise is 10 years ago, you were trying to be confident on stage, and now you're more comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between that and how you reached that?
Well, some of it happens because of how I'm perceived has totally changed. And Emily was saying this to me. She's like, when you're doing stand-up again, you look different on stage than you used to. And so you have to like be aware of that. So when I was like, a scrawny little guy, I had to like project confidence. And now I kind of have to do the opposite. I kind of have to like hang back. I don't realize I truly feel like exactly the same person I've been always, but the way people perceive me really has changed quite a bit. And so I have to be careful. There are certain things that I can't really do anymore that I used to be able to do on stage. Like, it's weird. Like, like if I'm being self-deprecating, I have to be aware of the ways in which I'm being self-deprecating. And I think, I do feel just more confident as a person anyway. I'm 10 years older. I'm 47 years old now, and I feel more comfortable with who I am. So I don't feel like I need to like be anything but completely myself on stage. I mean, that was the goal for me for a long time. Even when I was doing stand-up back then, I was like, I want to be exactly myself on stage. Now, up until The Big Sick, that was a more confident version of me on stage. And now I try and really have it be like just me and not even any exaggerated version of me. I really try it.
You start up top and you address certain things. And one of it is like, don't be weird about the muscles. And I think it's interesting because I do think most people be like, oh, he has muscles now. He must be really aware of how people look at him. But it's like all comedians are putting themselves in front of people. Like, I think about, like, in my brain, it's iconic that you wore, like, a really loose, schlubby sweatshirt at your Beta Male special.
Yes.
Which, to me, also felt like a person being aware of being looked at. And now there's just sort of the converse. But it's still the same essential thing of, like, it's one thing to have muscles on a big screen. It's another thing to, like, literally be in the same room as your muscles, I imagine. Did you feel that from the audience?
I just felt like as I was writing material, I was like, oh, has to be different because people see me so differently. So there's a lot of stuff that's just not going to work anymore, which is good anyway. Like, I'm not trying to recreate what I was. And then I had to find this weird thing where I was like, this is something I want to talk about on stage. So I kind of have to wear something that does show it. Like, ideally, I would have liked to have worn a jacket or something on top, but I was like, I have to show this because this is a significant portion of the set, and I really want to talk about this stuff. So I had to find this balance of like, all right, I have to show off a little bit so that I can like undercut it and talk about it and all this stuff. So so much of stand-up is when you're on stage, how you're being perceived and how you're playing with that perception is such a big part of it.
So the special has about 8 sections, I think, if I counted correctly. And I'd be happy to talk about every part of it, but we only have so much time. So I'm going to focus on just sort of 3 chunks. So the first big piece of the special is about your cat, Bagel, turning 16 and getting sick. I know she passed away recently, so I first want to say I'm sorry for your loss. Now, was it feel like to now have it's like it comes now like a memorial to her?
I just picked out, I'm going to put a thing at the end of the special. Oh, a loving memory. So, and I just picked that up yesterday. I mean, this just happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yes, it does, and I'm very happy I did that because now I won't ever do that material again. Of course.
Yeah, because it would have been too hard to do now.
It just doesn't feel right to do it. Like, who wants to be like, listen, my cat's dead. But when she was alive and really sick, this is what it was like,
This is the story of what killed my cat.
Exactly. Can't do that. And it just makes me, it's just too sad. And that, when that material comes in, I structured the set where I was like, these are the things I want to do. And when I was writing stand-up again, I was like, I want to talk about my cat being sick. This is important to me. This is a big part of my life. I want to be able to figure out how to talk about it on stage and have it be funny. And it comes at a very particular point in the set because I start off doing jokes that are shorter, jokier jokes. And when I get to the bagel part is when I consider the set to really start.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, all right, now all that was a platform so I can talk about this.
Yes.
And then by the end of that, then everything else is just stuff that I'm like, all right, now this is the stuff.
Yeah, the first parts are just sort of like, this is me being a comedian.
That's right. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to, in fact, I had like a wish list before I was going into the recording. And I was like, I would love to have another bit in the beginning that's just like a jokey joke. So, my first real joke, I talk a little bit about muscles and stuff, but the first real joke is about getting high. And that's just a jokey joke, So, yeah, I wanted to like warm people up, be like, yeah, this is comedy. And then get into like, my cat's heart is too big,
You start that section by asking permission to talk about a more sensitive thing, which I'm not sure I've seen a comedian do, especially not in a special. What was the thinking behind that?
I just wanted to get them to get ready for something that's a little bit different. And actually, Martin Starr, who he was like, I would sort of do that. And he came and saw my set a couple times. I was doing it in Austin, and him and his wife live in Austin now. And he was like, when you ask them that, really ask them that. Like, so that if they say no, you don't do it. Like, really, you're not just saying it. Really ask them that. So I was like, that's really, so yeah, I really, really asked them that. And it also, I think it sets people up for like, all right, this is going to be a little bit different. Puts them in a different mindset. And I part of the thing of doing comedy is you want the audience to feel safe. Like part of the job of a comedian, I think, is to be like, I am in control here. Don't worry. We may go to some weird places, but I always know what it is. So that's my way of also being like, you're going to be safe. It's not going to be, it's going to be about some stuff that's a little sad, a little dark, but you're safe. It's all part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think it sort of does a nice thing of, if you don't say that, you can do the joke, and there'd be people who would leave the show being like, yeah, that stuff about that cat was so fun. Like, they wouldn't even know it was even that personal, but something by saying it's personal, both lands more gravitas to the parts where you actually are sweet and sad when the cat is sick, and then does the opposite, which is then sort of allows them to be like, oh, there are still jokes in this thing.
Yeah. I mean, part of that, the challenge of writing that whole chunk was you're really fighting against yourself, because if I really just want to talk about it, it's not funny. I think it was Doug Stanhope or somebody, I forget who it was, maybe Bill Hicks, who said, in the beginning, you like think of funny stuff and say it, and later you think of what you want to say and then make it funny. And that's really what I wanted to do with all that bagel stuff. I was like, I want to talk about this. And what was interesting that I did not anticipate was, and I should have, is how many people have had that experience. And I really feel that. Like, I feel the audience really connecting with that stuff, because, so many people have pets, have lost pets, all this kind of stuff. So it really sort of changes the temperature in the room when I finally get to that section.
There's so many funny parts of this section that I could talk endlessly about, but I want to ask you about the tie bow joke. Can you explain the basic thing? Because I don't want to do your material at you.
I mean, now I haven't done it in a couple months, but it's basically that, like, one of the ways to give her a pill is you have to open her mouth, and I can't get her mouth open. I don't know how she's been, like, exercising her jaw muscles. I don't know if she's been doing Tai Bo or a more updated workout reference.
Or a more updated workout reference. That's the type of joke you're not seeing anymore that I miss. The sort of, like, awareness of stand-up convention stuff is sort of like, there's few moments where I'm like, these guys. This is what comedy used to be.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
We're gonna get to one of the other ones later, but it really is like, it was like a warm hug. That
oh, thank you.
As a person who cares about comedy and remembers your voice, it's like it really is like you are able to capture your comedic voice, regardless of the sort of other perspective you're able to bring to it. I believe I've heard you mention this joke in interviews while you were still working on it, and it seemed like it was once much longer, or there was like more to it, or even if not, when you've talked about this illness in some interviews, you will say like, it made you think about your own mortality. And you don't say that in this joke. No. You don't say, and that's when I realized I'm going to die. You don't have that, but like, do you feel like that is in the joke, even if it's not said in the joke?
I mean, I will say, when Bagel first got sick 2.5 years ago, is genuinely the first time I actually emotionally felt my own mortality. Obviously, I knew I was going to die someday, but, I turned 45 and Bagel got sick exactly at the same time. And that was right before I'd really started going hard on the special. It really was kind of an existential crisis because I was like, people have been like, when you turn 40, 40 was fine because I was like, double that, 80s. Most people get to 80s. When I got to 45, I was like, that's 90. Most people don't get to 90. More than likely, I'm more than halfway through this whole thing. And then Bagel got sick, and I was just like, oh my God. So it just like really, really hit me. I think it's in there. The reason I didn't want to talk about it specifically is because it's such a big thing that it sort of, the hour becomes about something else. And I wanted it to be about like sort of specific, not specific things, but I didn't want that to hijack everything. That is something, that is something I do want to talk about.
Yeah.
I know Bill Burr talks about it in his new special a little bit. I want to talk about that at some point, but I felt like it wasn't right for this special.
I was curious because, as you said, before the big sick, as a stand-up, you wanted to be some version of open on stage. You want to be who you were on stage. You wanted to be, I think you said, like, my goal was to be naked, whatever that meant, and like beyond anything else. Then the big sick comes out, and you were like regular famous. And not only that, Big Sick is your life. And so you have you have the thing that happens when people are famous where people feel ownership over your life. And because you gave them a part of your story, you have to, I imagine that time period, create, okay, this is the sort of divide. And now you're returning to a form that is not about that divide. How did you figure out what the line was for you?
That's a really good question. I've thought about it a lot. Because, it is true up until the big sick. I mean, I was doing Silicon Valley, I was acting and stuff. But really the job of a comedian is to be exactly the same off and on stage. In some ways, your life is your art too. You're talking about how what you really believe in, all this kind of stuff. And then as I became like normal famous, as you're saying, I don't know how you put it, I realized there has to be a divide between personal and public. Mm-hmm. And then going back to stand-up, I was like, I can combine those, but I want to do it on my terms. And that's why specifically I talk about certain things that I had not talked about that other people had talked about me. In a way, that was an effort at synthesizing parts from my personal life into my public image. To make my public image closer to me. Obviously, there are still certain things that, that are mine, but I was like, okay, these are the things. Because I really had a really intense reaction to sort of being more recognizable, and I kind of retreated. Especially then when COVID hit, I just completely was like, I got scared of crowds, like just on the way here, a guy just like took a picture of me, and I got angry. I was like, just ask me. If you ask me, I'll do it. It's so hard to complain about this. It genuinely is.
Well, it is hard. It is interesting. You feel comfortable complaining because it's not complaining. It's just sort of a weird thing that happens to some people.
Yeah.
So I think you don't worry about the complaining thing.
Okay.
People, and many of these people have seen your special, and I feel like you answered that part of it.
Yeah. So, what was I saying?
You retreated for a while.
I retreated for a while, and then when I wanted to do stand-up again, I was like, all right, there's a lot of like misconceptions about me and perceptions about me. People see me as something that I'm not. A lot of people saw me getting in shape as a betrayal because my whole thing was like, I was a nerd. I had a podcast about video games. I had a podcast about X-Files, and suddenly now I'm muscular, so now I've become a jock or whatever it is. And I really haven't. I'm exactly the same person. You can ask my friends. I really am exactly the same person. Emily and I still play video games all day. And so I was like, okay, a little bit of it was, you guys have been saying all this stuff. Now I want to say stuff about it and own a little bit of that conversation and say my perspective on it. And then people are going to have reactions to that too. That's the other thing. Emily was like, just so you know, when this comes out, it's going to be like another time when people start talking about this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but at least I'll have said what I want to say about it. So it was really... When I retreated, suddenly there was this like image of who I had become, and I had changed, and it had sort of, to me, felt like it had become fact. Like, oh, Kumail is now a different person. He's changed. He's not one of us anymore. And so this was my way of being like, this is who I really am. And, take some of my personal and put it in.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's a grand tradition of that in stand-up, right? Like, I think if in so much as, like, it is not, like, Richard Pryor, some of the most famous jokes in the history of stand-up is Richard Pryor talking about the public perception of him.
Right.
And figuring out a way to make it more personal. And because there's this sort of public perception, more comes out of it. And it did feel like, when we were saying you were going to talk about mortality, that would have distracted from this other point of like you're making about who you are and reconciling with an audience, which does seem like the sort of main thrust of the special. I was curious about the Emily part of it because she's the other part of the Big Sick. You wrote it together. You were collaborating together in your stand-up before that. How did what were the conversations like with her? What was she comfortable with? Were there things that you had to figure out because she didn't decide I'm returning to stand-up by, like it's a little bit different. Not to mention when you were stand-up purely, I imagine sort of the work-life balance was worse.
Yeah. Yeah, much worse.
How did you reconcile all that? Or is it difficult? Was it interesting? What was her perspective on it?
It was difficult because, I'm losing my nighttime with my wife, and my favorite thing to do is just spend time with her. It really is. And so that's what it was, like the 2 days a week negotiation. And then with touring, it was, I would do 2 weekends on, 1 weekend off. And it was, on the weekend I would do, if I'm doing like theaters, I do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday. One of those would only be one show a night so that Emily and I could get dinner afterwards. So there was like and she traveled with me as much as she could. And so there were like very practical things we did to make sure we weren't spending too much time apart, that this wasn't taking me away from the thing that is most important thing to me in my life, which is my relationship with Emily. And then with the stuff, the personal stuff, Emily's one of the people who actually encouraged me to talk about it. When I started doing stand-up again, the first bit, so I wrote a bunch of stuff and I was doing it for a couple months at Largo, and it wasn't until I did the swimming pool bit that's in there, which is very much a bit.
Just so you haven't seen it, it's the story about you and Emily seeing people on a date at your swimming pool.
Yeah, at our swimming pool. And again, that also is a little bit acknowledging how our lives are different now, you know? Not showing off or anything, but just that's another, because the other thing that happens is when you become like successful, people are like, oh, now you're like divorced from this thing. You're pretending to be something you're not. And I'm like, I'm not really pretending to be something I'm not. Like, I do have more privilege than I used to have. When I wrote that bit and I did that was the first bit that I was like, oh, okay, this I think is as good as some of the older stuff I did. And that one bit gave me a lot of confidence, because I was like, oh, I can still do it. Because a part of it is, I'm going up at Largo, I'm writing stuff. It's all doing pretty well, but you're sort of like, what if I don't have that anymore? Yeah. What if I cannot write the way I used to be able to write? And so when I did the swimming pool bit, I was like, okay, all right, that bit I think can stand next to some of my older stuff. And then I was like, okay, so I am capable of it.
That the knife part.
The knife part.
It is. The knife part's so good.
Thank you.
It's hard to describe it without it just really is so good. It's the thing of very short setup, even for that, which is just Emily being like, well, we have a knife. Yeah. And then it's just like punchline.
Yeah, I mean, and that structure of joke was something that I decided when I moved to New York in 2007. I was like, all right, I want to be able to write jokes that are set up and then a bunch of punchlines in a row. And that was a specific thing I wanted to do. And I did that with, I had a joke, the cheese, the thing, which is the joke you had me do on stage, the cyclone. All of that came out of that like sort of strategy of of wanting to have a bunch of punchlines in a row. And so that sort of came from the same thing. Yeah.
I was thinking about the sort of what you do or do not give your audience, and also that specifically the time period you were away from stand-up is when, like, your generation of comedians all did specials and where they talked about why they are or not having kids.
Yeah.
And I was curious if that is something you thought about talking about. Is it something that you felt like was specifically for you? You do not need to tell me why or why not you made those decisions, but I was just curious if that's something that you were aware of, because it is a thing that I think your age group of comedians all kind of covered while you were away.
That's interesting. It's never been like such a top of mind thing for me, you know. When I was a kid, I was like, someday I'll have kids. But us deciding to not have kids wasn't really a decision. It just sort of was like, do we want to? I don't, and we still talk about it, you know. It wasn't really a big thing. I just didn't ever feel like there was anything missing in my life. And I know, you know, having a kid change, you know, you learn whatever it is.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't know what that is. So I don't know what I'm missing. So I'm totally fine with that. You know, Seth Rogen has talked about it a bunch publicly. And I think he talks about it, you know, very intelligently. I don't have as much to say about it because it's just not something that's ever really been like a decision that's been like such a big one, honestly.
Were there conversations about things with Emily about things that were too personal?
Yes.
Did she help you, or was she pushing sometimes you could be more personal? Like, was it just, you don't even have to say what it was, but did you feel like was she always on the side of don't talk about that?
No, Emily's pretty good about you need to talk about this thing, but also like, hey, keep this to ourselves. This is for us. And even in The Big Sick, you know, there were certain things that she's like, that's just ours. And even now we're writing something together. We were talking about this yesterday where she was like, I don't want to put this in there. So she's very good about keeping those things. But she did really want me to be, you know, just actually vulnerable on stage and actually be truthful about how I was feeling and stuff. So she did, she did, you know, encourage me to really go into and talk about that stuff. You know where the last 15 minutes were...
Which we're about to get into.
Okay, well, let's get into it.
No, it's a perfect... Oh, yeah. So the last section of the special is a long piece about the reaction to you saying that the reaction to the Eternals and your body transformation made you go into therapy. And before we get into it, I want to say one thing, which does not come up often in podcasts because I don't think most people watch the Eternals. But I will say this, which is you're really good in the Eternals.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. You know what's really funny? Because now this is something that's like become part of, like, you know, I've talked about it here and there. Like just 2 days ago, I'm walking down the street and someone goes, I actually like the Eternals. I'm like, you don't have to say the word actually. Just say.
There are issues I have with that movie tonally and structurally, but the movie you're in, your arc and your sort of tone, that's a good superhero.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying it.
So I was like, because no one seen the movie, can you talk about a day where you're like, this is great? Like the dancing scene. The
dancing scene was very, very challenging for me. I actually enjoyed that entire process so much because I loved everybody I was working with. I love Chloe. She's made another movie now, Hamnet, that's getting amazing reviews. And so I had a great time doing that movie. I was in London for 6 months. Bagel was with me. Emily was with me. Yeah, I could shoot lasers from my fingers. I mean, it's amazing. You know, you're like, big budget movie. The food's amazing. Everybody's, like, the resources at your disposal are so huge. I mean, you know, one of the first things I ever filmed was Portlandia. And you have like 3 granola bars and like chairs that we all sit in. That's all we had. And then to be on that, where you have like this massive trailer and all this stuff, and it was I had a great time.
I don't know. Many interviewers don't know this, but I do know this. What was it like returning to do What If? Was it healing to get to play that character?
I really loved it. Because I really loved playing that character. I really loved playing Kingo, and I don't think I'll ever get to do it again when they asked me to do that. A friend of mine wrote that episode. He also wrote that episode of Twilight Zone that I did. And Alex. And so I was like, yeah, I loved going back to Playmate. It sort of felt like a nice way to say goodbye. You know, with Catherine Hahn, who's incredible. Absolutely love her. Yeah, it really was like a way to like, it felt like closure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Multiverse is here. You can be the only Eternal as the one person. Were you scared to talk about that stuff? Was there pressure from industry people not to?
Not really. I haven't really felt anything because I haven't really said anything about that movie that I don't really believe and that they wouldn't agree with. You know, like when I first when it's sort of first that in that interview when it became like a thing,
Yeah.
when I did the interview with Michael Rosenbaum and I talked about the therapy, it became a big thing. I did call the producer of the movie and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make this a thing. He's like, it's totally fine. He did not. And whenever it's been a thing that's come out in the news, I always reach out to people over there. Hey, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't mean this to be a thing. And they're like, no, it's totally fine. I've gotten no pushback
Got
on
it.
it because I haven't said anything about the movie that I think they'd be upset at. I really like the movie. You know, I really like. I really love Chloe. I think she's a phenomenal filmmaker. I think it's unlike anything else in the MCU. No, so I haven't really gotten
Yes.
any pushback. But at the same time, I don't want to be defined by this thing
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
considered a failure. You know. But it's something that keeps coming up, and I know it's going to come up again when the special comes out. But I wanted to be able to like talk about it as like, here's what I want to say about this whole thing.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I think motivated you to return to stand up from our interview is I said, probably as a slip, when you were a comedian or when you were a stand-up, and you did not like that. You still don't even like hearing.
I do not remember that.
The thing that I think in your bone makes you a comedian is I think a lot of actors would just never address that they're even in the movie ever again.
Yeah.
And the fact that you would talk about it, like it's
Yeah.
almost like you're like, I'm going to be the face of this movie's failure, even though you're like 6th or 7th on the call sheet, probably.
Yeah.
But you are the first eternal anyway. But I think that is a comedian's instinct. Be like,
Yes.
not run away from this, being like, oh, there's so much here
Yeah.
actually to work on.
Yeah, and it was something that really was, it really genuinely shook me, and it was a part of, I had to deal with all of it for a while. It took me a long time to sort of deal with it, but I was like, if I'm going back to stand up, for me it was like, when I started up stand up again, I had the luxury of being able to decide what I wanted my stand-up to be. Because I've gone back and I've seen people who the entire 8-9 years I was away had been doing stand-up. Some of them got better, but some of them are exactly the same. And they were great then they're still great. Because if you don't take a break, you don't have to sit back and reevaluate and go, why am I doing this? You're just writing the next bit. Not that everybody does that, but that's like the path of least resistance, right? So I see people, I'm like, you're still great. You're still the same comedian. When I go back, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this thing again. I'm taking time away from my wife, away from my home. There has to be some purpose for this. Like, why do I want to do this again? Like, and the reason to do it has to be bigger than just, I want to be on stage and get laughs. And so when I sort of was like, okay, why am I doing this again? And really it was because I wanted to talk about all that stuff. Once I sort of figured out, because it was a collection of bits and I was doing sets. And when I sort of wrote that final thing, and it all sort of, I wrote it all at once. And the first time I did it was, and then I honed it, but it wasn't really that different. Like the first time I did it, it felt very similar to that. Because I put everything in there that I wanted to talk about, about like therapy and success and failure and people's perception of me and how I feel about people's perception, all that stuff. It's like so much to put in. But really, it was like in one sitting, all that stuff happened. And then I had to go in and write jokes, but the structure of it kind of came pretty quickly. And when that happened, I was like, oh, this is the reason for why I'm doing stand-up again. And now I know what the hour is.
It is interesting because I think for people in certain maybe cities or whatever, you'd be like, oh, therapy is normalized. Now everyone's fine with therapy. Everyone's doing it. But I imagine the reaction that you got exposed you to like a perspective on therapy that is just sort of not like still a resistance that some people have.
Well, it's scary. Therapy's scary. I mean, and I know most people don't have access to it, and that's a whole other thing, and that's really tricky. But even if it's not therapy, I think having vulnerability or being able to reckon with what's inside you is very important. And I think it's possible to do that without therapy. So it's really about that. It's not really about therapy as the end goal. The end goal is to be able to feel your own feelings and know what's going on inside you. I think that is extremely valuable and everybody would benefit from it. And I wanted to talk about that stuff because for a long time I was also, not in touch with my feelings. I would get angry all the time. I talk about all this in the special.
Yeah.
and sort of realizing how much of myself I had repressed was such a big thing for me. And it's kind of what I thought about for years, where I was like, oh my God, I had all this stuff inside me that I really tried to ignore. And what a shame. And it was, I made life difficult for the people I love and the people around me, because I wasn't like dealing with myself. I was like, I think this is a valuable thing to say. And I can say it in a very personal way because I've had a very specific personal experience of it. And I was like, okay, so that's a reason to leave my wife twice a week.
How did you, the thing that I think is so impressive about a lot of this special is you have short little examples that perfectly capture the thing that you're trying to say, right? I think it's like any of those stories could be big, long stories and then build to whatever. And was it, when you were specifically, I'm thinking about, you needed a moment to capture repression from I imagine, as you said, like a life of repression.
Yes.
How was working on that part? How did you land on the things that you wanted to bring up? Were there examples that felt too personal? Were there examples that felt too harsh to bring up? I mean, the example you bring up, which is about your dad getting into a car accident, I think is really interesting. You're like, I'm just curious how you massaged that part for yourself personally. How did you land on it?
I asked my dad if I could talk about it, first of all. And I think that some of that came from actually Emily being like, you're talking about these concepts that are a little bit vague and you need to have like specific examples so that people understand exactly what you're saying. So actually that part that you've pinpointed, that like very little chunk where I'm trying to explain what's going on about how like I was feeling things, I didn't know what I was feeling, and I was then turning that into anger and pointing it at the wrong thing. That actually took a lot of doing because people just weren't quite following it. And I realized I had to like repeat certain things, step certain things out, add that story in there, I think it becomes safer if I could say, I don't know how you're feeling, but this is what it was like for me. And I think people will be able to understand like, oh yeah, I've had that. That's exactly what I've been through, So that part actually took quite a bit of work because, and then the danger again becomes like, you don't want to go too long without having a punchline, So that was really the most challenging part of that whole thing is how do I convey all this stuff and not have it seem like self-indulgent and have it be funny.
Yeah, it is a dance. I think the sort of line that it makes the entire thing work is someone's like, you essentially you're talking about like as if you don't have any problems because you were in boohoo, you're in this movie. And then you essentially like, I have problems too. It's like whatever, my cat was sick.
Yeah.
And then you say sometimes my abs gets
yeah.
And I think that switching, like I do think helps being like
you really need to have those to keep it afloat, that line actually came from I was doing something there and someone who was opening for me, I cannot remember her name. I'll find out. Shit, maybe don't put this in because I can't remember her name. But she was like, how about this line? And I was like,
oh, she came with
I was like, that is exactly the perfect thing that it needs. And that was the first time I ever did that bit. The first time I ever did that bit, I was doing a movie in Providence, Rhode Island, and there's a club there called the Comedy Connection, which is like 200 people, tiny club. And I'd sort of set up this thing where the Netflix festival was happening in like May 2024, I think. And a few months before that, I was like, I'm going to book an hour there. I don't have it yet, but that'll give me the impetus to get it done. And then I ended up shooting this movie in Providence, so I had to keep doing stand-up. And I did it first at the Comedy Connection, and the host, and she was really funny. I feel so bad. But the first time I did it, she was like, do you want to, how about this line? And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what that part means.
In this special, you describe anxiety as, it's an interesting idea you have, which is essentially like we have the brains of like hunter and gatherer. So like when we experience anxiety, we think we're like a lion's about to attack us. But that is also sort of specifically the result of people whose like body chemistry develops in like more dangerous parts of the world. And I was curious if you feel like there's something related to your processing of anxiety and growing up in Karachi, which you've described in previous special as I can't remember how he put it, but it was as dangerous or even perceived as dangerous.
Yeah, growing up, the difference here is people assume safety unless it's specifically not present, and there you assume danger unless it's specifically not present. I mean, we just knew. I don't want to paint it as something it's not. I had a wonderful childhood. I was very safe. I had a great, I really genuinely loved Karachi, but there was violence, and we were very aware of the violence, and we saw the violence, and we saw people with guns walking around all the time, a lot of guns. And so I think that might be part of it, is that the part of you is always a little vigilant. It happens a lot where people go visit, another country, and they end up going to the wrong part because you're from here and you assume everything is safe. There, we don't have that, So maybe, but it was something that you always had to be vigilant of. There were times where we wouldn't go to school because stuff was happening in the city. And again, I don't want to paint Pakistan as something it's not, but it was. I do remember, since I was a little kid, being aware of violence around me and having to be very careful of it. That threat was very, very real, and it was present all the time. And it was, I was very scared of something happening to my dad. There was a moment where they were killing doctors specifically, and my dad's friend, who has a clinic close to him, got killed. So it's that day could have been my dad. So it was something I was very aware of.
The part of the special, or part of the section that I'm it was almost like cheering in my house, was when you bring up COVID.
Yeah.
Because it is a thing that I talk about all the time, which is, it is wild that, because I think many comedians were kind of doing comedy, some version around it. So they don't have distance from it, because it's that's just sort of, I told a lot of my COVID material while doing it.
Right.
And you come back, it's why is...
Yeah, why is...
approaching that, also that section has some of the funniest jokes in the entire special.
Oh, thank you.
Can you talk about that, doing that?
Yeah, I specifically wanted to talk about COVID. And that's one thing Emily was don't talk about that. Nobody wants to hear that. I was I think I do want to talk about it, because I do think it... this is not a controversial statement. I genuinely think it broke the world, and the world has not recovered from it.
Yeah.
I really think it exposed certain things. I think we were already on this path, but it really hastened it. And I wanted to talk about it because, to me, COVID was a very big thing, because Emily is immunocompromised. So for us, it was a very real, very scary thing. And when I would see other comedians flaunting it and having parties and being this is bullshit, enraging to me. It's still enraging to me. Somehow people are still denying that it was a real thing when so many people died. So I really wanted to talk about that. And I was how do I talk about it in a way that isn't... Because I do feel we all feel it, even if we don't talk about it. I think, COVID never went away. It's all inside us. I don't mean the actual disease. The actual disease is obviously there, but what we all went through is still part of it. I think, the vehicular accidents went up. I think that unprocessed stuff is all underneath everything all the time. So that was something I genuinely wanted to talk about. And I was okay, how do I talk about this? And when I started doing the last 15 minutes, I was oh, this is a good place for me to put this in, because it genuinely was when I was doing the special, I was this might be the last special I do. And so if it is, I want to talk about all the stuff that I really want to talk about.
There's a line. So you're describing what COVID was like. You have a very funny section about washing bananas. That's great.
I washed bananas.
Then you talk about, to capture how extreme it was. This section is, I believe, only jokes. I don't think you go all the things you said are not in it, but you feel it. And you explain, you went and got a cheesecake, and then you microwaved it for 2 minutes, and then you're eating the Devil's Night cereal. Yeah. I told that to a colleague, and you go, that's that Chicago guy. That is so distinctly you, Pete Holmes, Kyle Kinane, that, all of you could... It's not that it's not distinctly you, but it's so true to whatever was the level of writing that you demand of each other.
I love that line a lot, and it's not the line that gets the biggest laugh, but I love it. It's all very true. I remember very specifically in COVID, Emily and I We would get food once a week. Friday night we would cook. Friday night we would get once. And we went to this place that had these gorgeous pastries, this French place that had like these intricate desserts. And I remember putting them in the microwave and reducing them to sludge. The Devil's Night cereal. Yeah, that's like, I mean, I think it does come from that. I think that's very true. Like Kyle and Pete. And, I think so much of what I think stand-up comedy should be, or how I want to do stand-up, really comes from my first few years in Chicago. Like, it was such an emphasis on individuality and having something that's like completely different. Like, I think I've talked about this. I probably said this to you. I remember we had a show called The Lion's Den, which was like Monday nights, 70 people sign up. It was an open mic, and it was everybody would show up there. That was the center of like the North Side Chicago scene. And it was amazing. And there was a crowd. And one night there was a really great crowd. And it's 5 minutes. So I went up and I did stuff that I'd done before to kill it. And I crushed. And I came off stage and Kyle Kinane was like, I heard you do that stuff before. I was like, God damn it. But that was the ethos, that was the ethic of it. It was like you had to really always be writing new stuff and pushing yourself.
Yeah, it is. Everyone else would just stop even at the example of it. And I think in many ways the audience is partly just laughing at the image of you eating microwaved.
Yeah.
But you need that line to just be like, we're here to... This is a sentence that only my brain would have thought of. And you need that. Like, it's truthful without being like, it's not about like, we think of truthful as only being like one type of vulnerable, but it is the like, how can I express only a thing my brain would have came up?
This is exactly, I'm going to sound so old here. When I was in college, I was a philosophy major and I was a computer science major. Now, the computer science major, we also had to write papers. And Sam Rubelsky, who's still a professor at that school, he would take a third of a grade away if you ever used a cliche, like suffice it to say, it goes without saying at the end of the day. He was like, every sentence has to be something that only you could write. So that, I remember writing papers and being like, how do I express this in a way? That all comes exactly from that. And to me, this is going to sound old, the idea of GIFs and memes is so against everything that I consider to be like good communication. Like, you're just literally repeating stuff that other people have done or sending the same Sure Jan GIF or whatever. That's become wit now. I think I sound so old. But when memes were coming up, I remember someone telling me about them and I was like, wait, so you're just saying stuff that people have said exactly the same way? And they're like, yeah, isn't it great? I'm like, that sounds like death. So a lot of when I'm writing, I want to be like, how do I say this in a way that is very different? I mean, just being able to regurgitate memes has become is what people think being funny is.
Yeah, there's someone reviewed, like a person online reviewed my book and complained that I didn't take memes seriously enough. Because I criticize.
You should.
Because the main thing I at least assert in the book is that there's a distinction between comedy as an art form and memes, which is just sort of like comedy is a performed art form by people who are expressing their individuality. It's like, yeah, but if I mean funny, it's like, I hold comedy to a standard beyond a thing you laugh at when you're just scrolling through other things.
Dude, I could not agree more. I really am so bummed out by memes. I know you ask a question, what is the thing that's considered comedy?
Yeah.
Is it comedy? Memes.
I knew, once you started going, I was like...
And it's like a thing that I really think about a lot, that especially now, because sometimes I'll get like, just got a note on a script that was like, hey, maybe this character should be like talking meme speak. I'm like, yeah, but this is like the main character of the movie. This is who we're supposed to like. Let's not, this guy's a scientist. I don't think he should be like speaking in meme speak. Oh.
The end of the special, the very end, talk about what you hoped for it. And I don't know if you want to keep it a secret or whatever, but like essentially you just say like an earnest thing to the audience and you have it repeat back to you. Especially the repeat back to you, I thought was very clever. But like, what was your thinking behind that? And what does it reflect about what you're ultimately saying the special kind of meant for you, which is sharing your side of the story about people's perception of you, reorienting people's, I think, relationship between celebrity, comedian, and audience.
So that sort of comes from Emily always says like comedy or going to movies is like the closest thing she has to church because it really feels like we're all in this together, feeling the same things at the exact same time. And that's one of the things I've always loved about comedy. And I became very aware of it when we were doing Meltdown, like the community of people coming to the shows. We had people who fell in love at the show, who got married. Like we're walking by our house and there's this woman who was like holding a kid completely frazzled, getting ice cream. And she's like, my husband and I met at your show and she's holding a baby. So I was very aware what I really missed about stand-up the entire time was that feeling of all of us in a room feeling the same stuff at the same time. And I think community truly is, I mean, it's such a cliche to say, but I feel like we have lost track of it. I think us as a society is what makes us human. Yeah. And so that in that moment, I was doing it for us to really feel like we're all in this together. You know, we have much more in common than we don't. It's a very divisive time, and I didn't want to get specifically political in certain kinds of ways, but I did want to highlight, like, it's hard for all of us. We're all going through this together. So say it back to me because I know you feel it too, and I want to feel it too. So that's what that is. Like, I do want the special to have a certain, like, I want people to laugh a lot, but I also want people to feel warm or at least a little bit more hopeful coming out of it, because I do think I have to think that art has to be able to have some sort of impact, you know? And I think stand-up comedy can be particularly powerful because it can speak so directly. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I think movies, TV shows obviously have points of view, but I think stuff gets lost. There are people who are huge fans of Star Trek who are incredibly racist. And it's like, how can you do that? The whole point of Star Trek is not that. They had the first interracial kiss on screen. And you're against interracial dating? That's crazy. That was another thing. I remember specifically when I was doing all those sets, I remember going up at a club, following someone who was talking about how they don't agree with interracial dating. And I was like, oh my God, now I have to make these people laugh. They laughed at that. Now they have to laugh at this. So yeah, I just wanted to create a sense of community. Actually, James Acaster, who you've had on, who's a friend, when I was first doing stand-up, my thing was always I want to be able to do well in every kind of room, every kind of audience. And in doing the special, that's why I did a lot of the clubs too, which may not always be my audience. But James to me was like, why are you doing that? It's okay if it's just playing to your audience. They're there to see you. Like, why are you trying to? And I completely agree with that. I think it's fine to just talk to the people. Like, he may not do well in every room, but he's one of the best comedians working. And I think you trying to appeal to everyone can really, like, you know, sand down all your edges. But yeah, really going back to your question, I just wanted to create a sense of us being in the same room.
Is that, you know, at the start especially, you almost cry, or you?
Yeah, that was overwhelming. I did not.
What was it? I mean, you've been touring this entire time.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was, so this might be a bit heavy. Emily got sick, and we met in Chicago. She got sick in Chicago. And we immediately, as soon as she got better, we left. So weirdly, Chicago had become like tainted for us, you know, even though it was wonderful. It's where I started stand-up. I have friends from Chicago. Emily and I met there. So the year before the special, and we'd been planning this for a while, we were like, we have to go back and we have to reclaim Chicago because it's become this bad thing in our heads. But it wasn't. It was wonderful. We're together because of Chicago. So we went back on our anniversary. We went back to the place we had our first date. Restaurant was not as nice as I remember. And we sort of did all the things to like reclaim Chicago, and we did. And I was like, okay, good, we have Chicago again. Chicago's ours again. So when we went back to for the special, it really felt like coming back home in a way that Chicago had not felt for a long time. And as we were there, Emily was like, you know, it's my coma-versary today. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, today's the day I went into the coma. My special was the next, we were taping it either that night or the next day. So like, it was really that day. So I just had a lot of that inside me. The feeling of like all the stuff that Chicago had meant to us and what we'd gone through in Chicago. So when I came out, I think that's what I was feeling. I was feeling like, oh, I'm back in the place where all this like kind of terrifying stuff happen, but I still have a tremendous amount of love for this city. It's not the city's fault, obviously. So I think that's what was really overwhelming.
Yeah.
I was really in a certain headspace when Emily told me that, because I had not, she's more acutely aware of those dates than I am. They're not like an anniversary in my head, but to her they are. The day she went in and the day she came out. And so I think all that was inside me. And I talk about how I opened for Zach Galifianakis there. And so I think that was part of it too. Like, I hadn't ever done the VIX since then. So it just really felt like, I'd done years of movies and TV shows where I was completely not in control. I was in the service of other people's visions. And it was great. I had a great time. But I think I felt all the emotion of, I'm doing something that is mine. This is me. I get to control all of it. I am proud of this. This is 100% me, top to bottom. And I'm doing it in the place where I met my wife, when my wife got really sick and got better. And that, happened however many years ago exactly today. I think all that stuff was really overwhelming. And also when I walked out, the reaction from the audience was so big, so overwhelming. It just sort of, the moment got the better of me.
I can only imagine, right? It's like the special is, you have the Eternals et al. Experience, and you become not a person to them. You're just sort of like another action figure that they're moving around and having opinions about. And then comedy, you aspire to be you. So you go on stage.
Yeah.
And the audience is being people, not...
Right.
They're not playing the video game of having opinions about celebrities. And even though that's happening, there's something, and it being filmed, and it's sort of all, and then obviously the Chicago, but you're just sort of like, Kumail, the person with this life, is going on stage.
Yeah.
And these are people who have some sense of this life in so much as they've seen that movie. And you're just like having a human moment. And it's surprising because you're like, I'm just filming something. You're like, oh, wait, you're just like, oh, I forgot that this is a human experience we're about to have. And then you're just confronted by it because it's all a wall of people being like, hooray.
Yeah, and we sort of talked about whether we should put that in or not, because I did 2 shows, and one of the shows I got choked up and one of them I didn't get choked up. And I was like, the whole show is about vulnerability and really feeling your feelings. So it feels like it feels honest to have that like moment in there.
As we said, you missed being good at stand-up, and now you've done this. Like, how do you feel now?
I would want to do stand-up again. I actually just now, so I sort of toured with that for a long time. I did like 7 or 8 months of touring. And then now I've been doing this play. So this is the longest break I've gone not doing stand-up since I started it up again. And now that the play is ending, I'm getting a little more brain space again. I'm starting to feel, because when I did the special, I was like, all right, this will be it. I don't know when I'm going to do it more.
Yeah.
Might be done forever, might be done for years. I'm starting to feel a little bit of like I opened a Google Doc, made a new Google Doc 2 days ago and wrote down a couple of sentences. I was like, okay, and I told Emily, I was like, hey, so it's not going to be like it was when I was going out twice a week every week. But I think I may want to go to Largo here and there when, Sarah has a show or Nicole has a show, whatever, and just like try stuff. So I'm starting to feel that feeling again of like wanting to write new material.
This is honest feedback on the special, and maybe this will be confrontational, which is this special, I was like, Kumail is a great stand-up comedian, like really a great stand-up comedian. So much so that I was like, I don't want him to do anything else. And this is not saying anything against your acting. I think you're a very good actor. I think you have potential. You got nominated for an Oscar, which obviously it means you know how to write movies. But there's other people who write movies. And there's other directors and there's other great actors. There are not as many, in my mind, great stand-up comedians.
Oh, thank you. I've thought about that. I've thought about, people like...
James Acaster said something similar to me, where he's like, this is the art form that I am great at.
Yeah. And he really is really, really very, very good at it. I've thought about that because I've seen like what I could do is just do stand-up and really try and by the end of my life be like, I was a stand-up who made a lot of great stuff and I'm like in the conversation, you know? It just comes down to the fact that I really like acting in movies and TV. I really enjoy it. I find it very challenging, like doing this play right now. Like, I just want to have new experiences. I want to challenge myself and do different things. With stand-up, what I learned was when I first started acting, doing Silicon Valley and stuff, this is going to sound arrogant, maybe. There was a time when I was doing acting, I was like, I have no idea how any of this works. This is so scary to me. I don't know how to do this. I did not feel that way about stand-up. But stand-up, I was like, I feel like I understand what this is. I know how to do this. I feel like I was saying, I feel like I can go up in front of any crowd and do really well. And to me, it was more exciting to do the stuff that I wasn't as good at. And so I'm not going to give up stand-up. I want to keep doing it. But I also want to do the other stuff because I do think it makes my stand-up better. But I also think just on its own, I love that challenge. I'm really, doing this play has been so exciting to me to, grow what you're capable of,
Yeah, I mean, I get it, right? It's your life, right? It's easy for me to be like, do what I want you to do. And I think it's part of, and you talk about it in special, it's like divorcing your work from the results of your work.
Yes.
And it would make no sense to then be like, and now I've decided to be one of the great stand-up comedians of all time.
Right. No, but truly, I do enjoy doing it. I mean, it is a tougher life, Like I said, you're doing Eternals, you're in the lap of luxury. You're doing stand-up, you're touring, you're moving around a lot. It's a harder life, but it's tremendously satisfying. I really love it. I really love being good at it. I want to get better at it. I just don't think I'll be letting go of the other stuff because I love doing it.
You got nominated for an Emmy for Welcome to Chippendales. And you've talked about how much you enjoyed that. And it was scary how much you cared about it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and what it would mean hypothetically to be nominated for an Emmy for this special and how it reflects how you maybe have changed?
Again, you want to divorce your art from the results of your art, right? I think it would mean a lot to me because it's really me. And, I was talking to, when I did Birbiglia's podcast, I was talking about this. I was like, you and me kind of took opposite paths where Birbiglia really doubled down on himself and just did stuff he wants to do, his show, his one-man shows, his movies. I kind of went the other way. I went and played in other people's sandboxes. Doing my stand-up again, I realized oh, this is me. This is all me 100%. And I think, obviously I'd love to get nominated for an Emmy for it. I honestly don't know how to put... I honestly don't know what expectation to have when this thing comes out. I mean, there's so many stand-ups. Nothing really there's so much noise. So I'm trying not to have too many expectations about it. Obviously, it would mean a lot to me because I'm really very proud of it.
Yeah. You mentioned that you might be directing something. Can you say anything about what it is or what directing means?
No, I can't say what it is. I want to direct this thing that is very, very personal to me. That is about some of the things that are in the special. It's not a script I wrote. Someone else wrote it. And it just is one of those things, it came to me as to act in, and I said, yeah, I want to act in it. And then I was kind of like, I feel like I really understand this, and I cannot imagine. It's just random. It's 5 different things that are all extremely personal to me. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
And it's got it's got horror. It's a horror comedy thing. I can't say too much about it because we're just now. I put it on hold for a couple of months while I was doing the play. Literally next week or the week after, as soon as I finish, we're gonna start to try and set it up. I want to do it because I really, again, having a little bit more, I want to be at the mercy of my own mistakes. I've been at the mercy of other people's mistakes. That's what I loved about doing stand-up. I was like, if this fails, it's my fault. I want to be, and that's why I want to do the movie too. I'm like, I really get it. And if it's not good, I want it to be on my own terms.
Yeah. Now it's time for the final section of the show. It's a laughing round. It's like a lightning round, but because it's a comedy podcast, it's a laughing round. This is I don't know if it's on the list, so it's going to be a new one, which is we used to ask people Mount Rushmore, but I determined that the comedy version of Mount Rushmore is who are your guys? In the grand tradition of WTF with Mark Maron, I ask, who are your guys?
My stand-up guys?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, for me, Conan O'Brien, one of my guys. I started doing comedy because of Conan O'Brien, and the fact that I know him, the fact that I got to, be one of the people presenting the Mark Twain Award to him was amazing.
Side note, did you like doing that? Every time I talk to people who've done a Mark Twain Prize thing, they said they hated doing.
It's very stressful. Well, it's also like for Conan, because he's such a great guy and so beloved, it's like everybody's there. So you've got like Colbert, and you got Will Ferrell, and you got Adam Sandler, and you got fucking David Letterman. It's like, I don't need all these people. And you're in a room with all these people,
Bill Burr said if he knew how good Mulaney was going to do, he would have said no.
Yeah. And Mulaney went up first.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's why I was like, I'm not going to try and do a set. I'm going to do something else because you got Mulaney, you got Burr, you got all these people who are going to do it. I'll do something else.
Sorry. To your guys.
Conan. I would say Zach Galifianakis' stand-up was a big, big thing. Seinfeld was one of my guys.
Two famous levers of stand-up for a time period. And though Zach has not released something, Zach still goes up seemingly like periodically.
Yeah, when I first started going up in 2023 at Largo, he was there all the time because he was there filming something. So I'd see Zach all the time.
Yeah.
He's so naturally funny. One of the funniest people, and so confident in his stand-up and his voice. Like, he would do stuff at Largo that I was like, I've never seen anybody do that. And he really doesn't care what the reaction is. Of course he's killing because he's Zach and he's so funny. I remember I saw Zach on Conan when he was playing a piano and doing something, and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is incredible. I would say those are the ones. Dana Gould, I listen to Funhouse a lot. I would say those are the people that, and then Chappelle. I mean, Killing Him Softly, is one of the perfect ones. I think Patrice's Elephant in the Room is one of the perfect hours.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Killing Me Softly. Yeah. It's just useful to be like, as generations grow up, born after it. They're just like, why is this guy this thing? You're like, there was a time.
Watch this.
Yeah.
You'll know. I watched it again recently, and it's just explosive.
Yeah.
It really feels like something special is happening in that room.
Do you have a favorite joke? Street joke?
I like the one, the what's the worst thing to hear when you...
After you blow.
Willie Nelson.
Yeah. Do you have a joke you wish you can steal? Do you have a new one, a joke that you saw recently that you're like, I wish I had that already and I can put it?
Oh, my God. No, not really. But I would say, some of those Mr. Show sketches, I'm like, I wish I had this. Like, to me, Mr. Show is my favorite sketch show of all time. And there's like a sketch in there about, they're like, it's in the dark ages and they're talking about science, magic as if it's science. And it's like a PBS documentary, but about magic. And it's so funny. To me, those guys, Bob Odenkirk's career has been so remarkable. David Cross, too. So I would say, I wish I'd done Mr. Show.
Do you have a short story of an interaction with a legendary comedian, living or dead, you're willing to share with us?
I've talked the biggest one is one I have talked about before, but it is bigger than any other one, is Robin Williams. I've been a fan of Robin Williams my whole life. I think when you look at comedians who then became great dramatic actors, there's nobody better than Robin Williams. I think a lot of comedy people stop doing comedy and they become serious actors, and Robin Williams never stopped being funny. He would do very serious stuff, but he would still do comedies. So to me, Robin Williams is like the pinnacle of a comedy career. And at Meltdown one night, I was on stage, and it was our birthday. It was mine and our birthdays one day apart. It was Emily's birthday, and I got off stage and I went to the side room, and Robin Williams was there. And I was like, hey. He's like, hey, I'm Robin. I'm like, yeah, man, I know. And I was like, do you want to go up? And he's like, oh, no. And I was like, are you sure? And then his hat and coat was off. He was like, just 2 minutes. And he went up, and he destroyed. It's this funny thing where you go up and you're like, Robin Williams, and people think it's going to be some UCB person pretending to be Robin Williams. And then Robin Williams walks up and people are like, what is going on? He did like 20 minutes, he killed, and he came off stage and he was like, I really needed that. Then he came back a couple of weeks later, he did it again. It was amazing again. And then right after that, he was gone. So to me, meeting him and having him be so kind was really, really very, very special. That was the most exciting, meeting with the hero I have ever had. I met Gallagher also, but we don't have to talk about that. He's gone, but he just complained when I met him.
While we're in this section, what was it like working with Steve Martin and Martin Short on that season of?
Genuinely incredible, because obviously they're Steve Martin, Martin Short, they're legends. Steve Martin genuinely doesn't know he's a legend. He genuinely doesn't know. Martin Short knows. Steve Martin doesn't know. It was incredible because this is an interesting thing maybe where, and I got this because I got to work with Albert Brooks last year as well. What those guys have is a thing where to them, Conan has this too. Comedy is sacred. There is no higher form of art than comedy. And I feel like a little bit my generation, like especially when I moved to New York and stuff, there was this whole feeling of like a little bit that effort was bad, that comedy was like a little bit lesser, so nothing could sound like a joke, There was this feeling of like comedy being like a little bit lame and you're being funny, but you can't really show that you're trying to be funny. And then working with these people, how important comedy is to them and how, I don't mean this in a bad way, shameless they are about it, where they just want to be funny. Like if you hang out with Conan, he wants to make jokes, he wants to make you laugh. And he's not trying to downplay it. Yeah. He's like, I'm trying to make you laugh. Yeah. Martin Short is the same way, They're just doing bits. Steve Martin is the same way. Albert Brooks will just like, what's the deal? They're just like doing bits all the time. And I found that to be so exciting and inspiring. And Martin Short and Steve Martin are genuinely wonderful, kind humans. Martin Short still calls me every now and then. Absolutely, truly the best. I've gotten to work with comedy heroes, and those two, meet your heroes if it's those two, because they really are the best.
Did you go to SNL 50?
I did not. Right. They asked me to go, and I was like, I don't want to be in that room being like, oh, I want to be up there doing,
Yeah.
I don't want to just watch. I would go if I had a bit to do.
Got it. Do you have a favorite day ever on set?
Wow, it's hard to know, but since we're talking about Steve Martin, Martin Short, there's a part where Steve Martin does a very, very Steve Martin physical bit that's like a long bit. And in rehearsal, I watched him like develop that in rehearsal in front of my eyes, figuring out exactly like, okay, I'll do this 3 times and I'll put it here. No, I'll do it 3 times and I'll put it here. And then I'm going to say this and you say this. Okay, no, wait. Now you say it. Like really working out the entire bit. And it was really, really thrilling to watch because the way he approaches comedy was quite different from how I at least approach acting, where acting comedy, like I was saying, I never think about delivery and timing, and Steve does. You watch his Apple documentary? It's really like he really like is methodical and meticulous about it. Martin Short is the opposite. He's like, let's see what happens. Let's see what comes out, But watching him develop that was really, really exciting. And I was with, Richard Kind. We were on the other side of the room. Steve, they're all sitting there. We're all standing here. That's the scene. And I was just like, can you believe we get to watch this? He's like, no, I mean, it's amazing. And by the way, Richard Kind, legend. But truly, truly one of the best people I've ever worked with. Amazing.
Do you have what's something that people think is comedy that is not comedy to you?
Other than memes?
Yeah.
I've never liked accent comedy. People can do other accents. I don't get why that's funny. I've never enjoyed it. And the fact that it crushes is baffling to me. Like, okay, yeah, he sounds a little bit like people from another country. Why is that funny? I do not understand it.
Do you have a joke that never worked that you'll go to your grave being like, I was right, they were wrong?
There's a joke that's not in the special that I really liked, and a little bit of me regrets not having it in there, but Emily talked me out of it. And it's a joke about, I've done it on panel, By the way, when I do panel, like, I'm doing Kimmel next week, the best panel is jokes that didn't work. The jokes that didn't work as stand-up, you do panel, perfect. It's a joke about cricket and in how in cricket the rivalries are very real. Like you guys think your sports rivalries here are real. it's a sort of a long bit, but I talk about the history between like the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears, their rivalry and cheeseheads and all this and all that, and then I explain their whole rivalry. And there's no jokes in that part. It's just me describing the rivalry, and then I say India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons pointed at each other. That's a rivalry, and I just loved that joke, and it just was like for the special. I had it in the hour for a while, and I love that joke, and I love everything. That part gets a big laugh. It just sort of momentum-wise never really worked in the hour. There was never really a good place for it. I still kind of wish I'd found a good place for it. I just never did.
Last one. What is the best time you ever bombed?
Bonnaroo. I think it was 2008 or 2009. I just moved to New York, and I was doing a show. And I think on the show were me, Amy Schumer, Todd Barry, and Triumph. And I was like, oh my God. I remember going there, and there's the trailer behind, and we walk in, and just the Triumph puppet is laying there dead, and I'm like, oh my God. I love Smigel, by the way. I've gotten to know him, hung out with him at the Conan Mark Twain thing. He's a fucking great guy, obviously a legend. So we do this show, and Bonnaroo, so this show's at like 2 p.m. Metallica's playing over there. You can kind of hear Metallica, and we're the only show that's in a tent. And so it's people who've been, if they want to get out of the heat, this is where they come to nap and stuff, and they've been doing mushrooms for 3 days. So I went up on stage. I was up first. Smigel put me up first, and it is not going well at all. It is not going well. And I start getting booed, like pretty heavily. I remember Nick Thune was sitting in the front row. I start getting booed pretty heavily, and then I start yelling at them. And then they sort of come around to my side, and they start sort of laughing and cheering. And I'm like, no, have the courage of your convictions. Boo me. And then I made them boo me. Even after they stopped booing me, I made them boo me. I did the whole set, and I got off stage. And then Smigel was like, you're going to be closing the show from here on out. It still comes up. Like every now and then, I'll have a YouTube clip. One of the comments will be like, I saw him have the worst set I've ever seen at Bonnaroo 10 years ago. Well, 15 years ago now. I would say that's the most memorable bomb I've had, in that I was like, I'm proud of that bomb. I'll wear that badge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was
Of course.
That was so fun.